Tough loss on Thursday night for the Memphis Grizzlies against the Houston Rockets. No other way to slice it. I'm going to tell you the main reason that Memphis lost the game to Houston. Talk about some other areas of concern going into a 4-game road trip that could be bad for the Grizzlies if they don't find a way to find their footing. And we're going to end on a positive note. It's Friday. We got to get down on Friday. You know that because you're an everydayer. And if you're not, hopefully you'll be one after this episode. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Friday. You've got to get down on Friday. You know it. It's fun. Looking forward to the weekend here on Locked On Grizzlies. We are partying. I am your host for this episode, Joe Mullinax, flying solo. No DeMichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication, finishing up his coverage of the game for them. So I am with you to close out our week here on Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much for being with us. And what a week it was. Thank you to everybody that's subscribing to the newsletter, our free daily newsletter, LockedOnDaily.com. Go to the Locked On Grizzlies tab. I have all sorts of content there for you about the game against Houston on Thursday night. We have national NBA stories. We have fantasy basketball advice. Again, free daily newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com. Subscribe to the Locked On Grizzlies free daily newsletter. Words from me and others on the NBA sent directly to your inbox. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing. Wherever you get your podcasts, we are proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can find us. Make DeMichael and myself part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode and a newsletter drop. Tough loss against the Houston Rockets, and we built it up in our last episode. Again, if you're an everydayer, you come by every time an episode comes out. DeMichael and I talked a lot about the importance of this game, a measuring stick game. We talked about how the Grizzlies can be elite. We saw on Wednesday night an impressive elite basketball game, basically a work of basketball art between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Thursday was a tier below that, but it was still an important game. Clear possession of the number 2 seed in the Western Conference right now was on the line. And the Memphis Grizzlies fall short at the hands of the Houston Rockets, 119-115. It could have been a heck of a lot worse. And we'll talk about that throughout this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, how it could have been worse. Kudos to the Grizzlies for buckling down in the second and fourth quarters, in particular defensively, holding Houston to very poor shooting numbers, scoring the basketball. Houston helped the Grizzlies out a little bit with their own putrid free throw shooting, 24-41. From beyond the or from the charity stripe, That's one of the ways that it could have been worse for the Grizzlies if Houston shot a little bit better from the free throw line. But there is one main reason that the Memphis Grizzlies lost to the Houston Rockets on Thursday night. And if you are an everydayer, if you come by and you check out the show every time an episode drops, you know exactly what I am going to say. And if you're new, first off, welcome. We're partying here on Locked On Grizzlies. I quote the great philosopher Rebecca Black every Friday where we do the podcast together. I talk a lot about the turnover problem that the Memphis Grizzlies have, but I want to stress something. It's not schematic in nature, at least not to me, not to my eye. And I've watched a lot of Memphis Grizzlies basketball over a decade now, almost 12 years now of Memphis Grizzlies basketball that I have been a writer, a podcaster, a blogger, whatever you want to call me, pseudo media member. I have been following this team for a long time. It's not the scheme. The scheme is the reason that Memphis is playing faster and more possessions are being created. So if you want to give them an extra turnover or two because of that, math says that's clear. But that is not what happened on Thursday night, and that is not what has been an issue for Memphis all season long. On Thursday night, the Memphis Grizzlies committed 20 turnovers. The Rockets only committed 13. And I understand that basketball is different than football. But that is 7 fewer opportunities compared to Houston that Memphis had to score the basketball. That matters. And where those turnovers come from matters. 8 of those 20 came directly from your two lead guards, Ja Morant and Desmond Bane. Neither of those two had a game where a assist turnover ratio was better than 1-to-1. Ja Morant, he only had 3 assists in the contest to 4 turnovers. Desmond Bane, 4 turnovers, 4 assists. That's unacceptable. That is unacceptable from your lead guards. That is not going to get the job done. You are not able to create offense consistently in a positive manner when your two lead facilitators struggled that mightily. And beyond the lost opportunity to score points, the opportunities presented to the Houston Rockets to score off of them destroyed the Memphis Grizzlies in this contest. The Grizzlies got 13 turnovers off of Houston, right? Whether it was a offensive foul, a steal. Jaren Jackson Jr. had 8 stocks in the game. We'll talk about Jaren later on in the show in a positive light. We've got to end happily on a Rebecca Black Friday, right? The Grizzlies only scored 11 points off of those turnovers, whereas the 20 turnovers that Memphis had, 31 points were scored by the Houston Rockets, 31, plus 20 in that area. The Memphis Grizzlies didn't get out-rebounded the way you might have expected, with Sengun playing the way that he did. And he had a dominant performance on the glass, 14 or so rebounds, I believe. He played really well, especially in the first quarter, which we'll talk more about later in the show too. But as the game went on, they were able to rein that in a little bit. Houston only won the rebounding battle by 1. That is a massive reason for optimism from this Grizzlies team. You would expect it to be larger, given the disparity in the front court, rebounding specific between Houston and Memphis. But it was the turnovers and the points off of those turnovers that really did the Grizzlies in this contest. That disrupts everything. And it's the reason that I think that the turnovers are the biggest problem. It disrupts the offensive flow of Desmond Bane, who did not attempt a single shot in the first half against the Houston Rockets. And that is absurd. That is a sentence that should never be said. Desmond Bane attempted 0 shots in the first half. He had several turnovers, at least 2. He had questionable decision-making because he's forcing things as a facilitator. With Dez, maybe that is the one that is the closest example to saying, okay, scheme might be at fault. Because Desmond has been a larger sample size of struggling with this downhill concept, drill penetration, kickouts. He is just not making sound choices with the basketball. And it really hurt in that first quarter where Houston exploded offensively. And it hurt in the fourth quarter when Memphis desperately needed shots and they lost possessions because Bane, instead of taking the shot himself, Marc Gasol-esque, if you followed Gasol during his peak in Memphis, sometimes the best shot is your own, Desmond Bane. Sometimes you creating your own shot opportunity is the best shot. Bane is struggling with that. And the turnovers that he committed killed the Grizzlies. To a lesser extent, because Morant had a better offensive game, they killed when Ja did it too. They killed the Jaren committing turnovers. Jaren Jackson Jr. was the best player on the floor, in my opinion, for the Grizzlies in the contest. Ja had the gaudier offensive numbers. Jaren had the better combination of two, offensive and defensive, two-way player. Jaren did some good things. The turnovers impact rhythm. The turnovers impact confidence. The turnovers impact, in my opinion, defensive communication. Because the same way that you can say defense feeds into offense, creating transition opportunities, getting out and running, the same could be true the other way. When you have issues in terms of your defense, when you're not on the same page, instead of investing energy and getting the ball in the hands of the guys on the perimeter where they want it or off of slashes and cuts to the rim, you in timeouts are trying to communicate what the hell is going on with your defensive issues. So it works both ways. When one area of the court is out of sync, it can lead to the other. And I think that Memphis really needs to clean up the turnovers. If they don't, they are going to have a short stay in the Western Conference playoffs. Are the Grizzlies elite right now? No, they're not elite right now. The Houston Rockets prove that. But despite all that, there are reasons for positivity around this team, even after a loss. But we're not ready to be positive yet, dear listener, dear viewer. We're going to come back here on Locked On Grizzlies. And when we return after this break, I am going to tell you some other space where I'm worried about this Grizzlies team. Again, heading into a West Coast road trip, not West Coast road trip, a road trip to Texas, I believe Minnesota as well on Saturday. It's going to be a big one for Memphis. They have to clean these things up. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stick around. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. I'm a big fan of Intuit TurboTax, and you should be as well. Are you tired of the endless waiting, wondering, and worrying about your taxes? Well, now that's a thing of the past. You see, taxes don't need to be complicated. They don't need to stress you out. TurboTax is here to change the game by matching you with a TurboTax expert who can get to work on your return right away. No more waiting for answers or wondering if you're missing out on deductions. Whether you've got one form or 20, TurboTax experts give your taxes their undivided attention while you get real-time updates on their progress so that you can focus on what really matters. You don't have to lift a finger, but you'll get the peace of mind knowing that your taxes are being handled by the pros. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert who's ready to take your taxes off your plate so you can focus on your day. This is only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Couple other areas of concern when it comes to these Memphis Grizzlies, things that make me nervous coming out of the Houston game in particular. Because again, 4-game road trip coming up, going to be the easiest piece of work, right? It just isn't. It's not going to be the easiest thing for the Grizzlies to work with. So they have to clean up these particular areas if they are going to be successful. Area number one, the first quarter start. Again, if you I mentioned briefly, the Houston Rockets scored 45 points in the first quarter. The Memphis Grizzlies scored 36, and usually you're like, oh man, Grizzlies scored 36 points in a quarter. That's common. That was the best quarter for both Houston and Memphis. It's a problem. The defense and the offense feed into each other. The issues, the offensive energy and turnovers feed into the defense. Lack of communication. The team is not on the same page. It reflects in both for me. It reflects in both areas. And that is a concern because they have to be able to stop teams from dominating them offensively. And it wasn't like Houston got red hot from three and just stroked it from there, as they have other teams have done to Memphis in recent games. It wasn't like that. It was domination in and around the paint. The Houston Rockets at one point in the first quarter were 11 for 11 in the paint. They didn't miss their first 11 shots in and around the bucket. Zach Edey got into early foul trouble. That'll hurt you, right? Your 7'4" center not being able to be on the floor. But it was also Sengun bullying the Grizzlies bigs. It didn't matter who it was. Jay Huff, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr. All of them struggled with Sengun. And that is going to be a guy, that is going to be a team in the Houston Rockets that you're going to have to find ways to contend with their physicality. If you're not able to do that, you are not going to be able to compete in the Western Conference playoffs. The darndest thing is that these teams have size. These teams have physicality. The Houston Rockets in particular play a physical style of basketball. That is what they are looking to do. They're not trying to cook you from beyond the arc. They're trying to bleed you out. They're trying to bludgeon you. They're trying to bring you into the mud and physically force you to beat them. And Memphis struggles with those kinds of teams. We've talked about it to Michael and I in the past, going back to the Lakers playoff series a couple years ago. The Lakers were more physical and had more physicality and tenacity, toughness than Memphis did. And that hurts this Grizzlies team. They have to be able to respond better than a 45-point quarter. To the Grizzlies' credit, and again, we will be positive on this episode eventually, I promise. To the Grizzlies' credit, they fought back. They didn't stop. They actually got the lead in the third quarter. So it's not like it was a dominant performance from Houston, but it was dominant, especially in that first quarter. And when you get down that deep, that early, it takes a lot of energy to fight back and dig your way out. Not digging such a big hole for yourself. That's going to be key coming up on this road trip. The next thing that I was really concerned by watching Grizzlies Rockets, if you are an everydayer to Locked On Grizzlies, you know I'm a Taylor Jenkins supporter. I've had my issues with him this season more than most seasons, but I'm a Taylor Jenkins guy. I think he's a good coach. There was a stretch in the second half, and I think at a time in the first half too, where John Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. were all on the bench at the same time. You had a lineup that was something like Luke Kennard, Jalen Wells, Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark. That should never happen. Okay, Jay Huff, I believe. That should never occur. You are paying John Morant, Desmond Bane max contracts. You are eventually going to pay Jaren Jackson Jr. a max contract. They are your very best basketball players. They are your guys that are at an all-star level or higher on a consistent basis. One of them should be on the floor at all times. Period. End of story. That should be a non-negotiable. For whatever reason, Taylor Jenkins has struggled with his rotations. If you want to give him the benefit of the doubt because of injuries and health, I can hear that to an extent. The Grizzlies got an influx of returning players in this game. Santi Aldama returning from injury. John Morant returning from injury. Desmond Bane returning from injury. Those guys did not play in Memphis's last game. They played in this one. Does that disrupt the flow? Does that have an issue with the turnovers? Potentially, sure. But Desmond Bane has had problems with turnovers all season long, regardless of who's on the floor with him. But that influx of talent should have been thank you to the basketball gods. Yes, I have my best players out on the court. It's not just Jaren Jackson Jr. It's Desmond Bane. It's John Morant. It's the guys that are supposed to be the cornerstones of this franchise. Let's give them the ball and let them cook. Let's let Dez have a run where he's the lead scorer, the lead guard, and he can be a guy that tries to get his own shot. Let's let Ja elevate Jay Huff and Zach Edey and Brandon Clark in these reserves. Let's let Jaren be that high usage guy that we've seen in isolation situations. Very few guys in the NBA can defend Jaren Jackson Jr. one-on-one. Once he figures out how to facilitate out of double teams, because that was an adjustment that the Houston Rockets made in the second half, you saw a lot more doubles on Jaren, and he had to kick it out. And when he was able to kick and dish, either that first pass or the pass that followed was a wide open shot. That is the next level for this team. And Jaren is the key to that. But we did not see the opportunity for that enough for me, because there were stretches in this game where all three of them were sitting out, hanging together on the bench. Shouldn't be a thing. That's a non-negotiable. That is a non-starter. For me, it is rotational malpractice. Are you trying to win a championship or not? Are you trying to be a true contender? Can the team as currently constructed be a true contender? Again, if you think you know the answer, I'm calling shenanigans on you, because we haven't seen G.G. Jackson, Vince Williams Jr., Marcus Smart. We may never see those guys to have a large enough sample size to know if this group as constructed can get the job done. We might just have to make our best educated guess as the trade deadline approaches. But I do know this. Desmond Bane, John Morant, more than likely Jaren Jackson Jr., they're your core. I only say more than likely Jaren because there's still an extension that needs to be signed, but I would be stunned if it wasn't signed in Memphis. That's your core. Bane, Morant, Jackson Jr. Everything else is on the periphery. Those three guys should be on the floor, or one of those three guys should be on the court at all times. Non-negotiable, full stop, shouldn't be complicated for whatever reason. Maybe, again, you want to argue somebody was tired. There were foul concerns. You got to find a way, man. You got to find a way, because that allows for Houston, especially when their starters are still in, you got to go tit for tat a little bit. There's some gamesmanship to that. You can't let your reserves get cooked by Sengun and other Rockets starters. It's just not that's not Luke Kennard's fault. That's not Santi Aldama's fault. That's not the role they should be playing. Let me know what really bothered you about the loss. Again, we've talked turnovers, we've talked rotations. We've talked about the slow start defensively. The offense looked good in the first quarter. Defense, not so much. What are you thinking? Hit me up in the comments. Let me know on X at Joe Mullinax. When we come back here on Lockdown Grizzlies, we're going to close out this episode with that much appreciated, much promised positivity. Reasons for optimism heading into this 4-game road trip. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened for me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your payments so that you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals with Rocket Money. Do it faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Check them out today. We close out this episode with positivity. I promised positivity, and you're going to get it, darn it, because when I say something, I deliver here on Locked On Grizzlies. Reasons for optimism. Reason number one on this Friday, heading into this 4-game roadie, why you should be optimistic about the Memphis Grizzlies. They fought, man. They competed, and that sounds like it's a bare minimum kind of thing with a team that's saying that they should be an NBA Finals contender. But a lot of times with a team like the Grizzlies or any NBA team, if you have a slow start like that, you don't see the opportunity for a comeback. You get cooked to the tune of 45 points in the first quarter. It's not our night. That's not what Memphis did. To their credit, that's not what the Grizzlies did. Again, they were able to hold the Rockets in check, especially in the second and fourth quarters of this game. Houston helped a little bit with their own free throw woes. That's important to acknowledge. But the Grizzlies didn't lie down. They fought back. Even in the case of Desmond Bane, who I've been hard on this episode, he continues to try, even when he's not doing what he should be doing offensively, he continues to look to help in other ways, rebounding, steals, all that sort of stuff. He is trying to make winning plays. Doesn't always work out the way that it should, but there were opportunities for him, and he did his best. They competed, right? Houston only scored 18 points in the fourth quarter. Memphis had open shots. Even with all the complaints and the feedback, constructive criticism, whatever you want to call it, that we've had on this episode, Memphis had a chance to win. There's room for growth. That's a positive thing. It's not like this is an end result. The Grizzlies can play better. I'm also optimistic about Luke Kennard for a couple of reasons. One, Luke played well in this game, 3 for 5 from beyond the arc, a couple of assists. He kind of filled in for Jalen Wells. Wells really struggled in this contest, 1 for 5 from the field. Maybe reinforce the reason that you're looking for a trade for a starting caliber wing. Wells probably isn't ready for that energy and playoff style basketball. Not to say that Kennard is. I want to stress that because Luke, we've seen in playoff style basketball with the Grizzlies, not like he has been a dominant force. He's been important, right? He's been an important offensive influencer. But at the same time, I'm not advocating for Luke Kennard being that guy. Okay, I want to stress that before you yell at me on X or in the comments. But Luke played well. Luke was a plus 13 in this game. He and Jake LaRavia had positive plus minuses. Brandon Clark was a plus 3. The only Grizzlies starter that was a plus was Jaren Jackson Jr. Okay, so again, single game plus minus is an iffy stat, but it does show who had success while they were on the floor. It may not have been because directly of Luke Kennard, but Luke did play, especially in terms of shooting, an efficient basketball game. That's a reason for optimism. Another reason for optimism, a good way to close out this episode. You're seeing the team find their footing in terms of competitiveness, right? In terms of fielding a roster and a rotation that actually could be in a playoff conversation. G.G. Jackson getting healthy. Vince Williams Jr. maybe a week or two behind him. There are cavalry members coming that are going to help this Grizzlies team continue to grow and get better together. And I think that is a reason for positivity and optimism. Because even in a space where you see a Jalen Wells struggle, where you see Scottie Pippen Jr. not attempt a shot and only have 2 assists to 2 turnovers, again, that's your backup guard. Having a 1-to-1 turnover to assist ratio, that's not good enough. That's not going to win you a game. When Ja and Des are struggling in that area and need somebody else to pick it up, that was not the case off the bench in this contest. But say you replace those minutes with the minutes of a G.G. Jackson or a Vince Williams Jr., guys that were supposed to be getting those minutes from the beginning. What does this team look like? There's reasons for optimism on that front. G.G. Jackson may make his return on this road trip. And a positive of this road trip is sometimes it helps the communication issues, the energy being off on one side of the court or the other that directly connects to the opposite end of the floor. Sometimes it takes a road trip, getting away. And the Grizzlies haven't really had that of late. Again, they went to California recently. DeMichael Cole was on that road trip, if you remember correctly. They had the trip OKC, Phoenix, Sacramento, Golden State. But again, they were at Phoenix and then at Sacramento. I think that being on the road, not having a back-to-back, that's a major piece of it. So they'll probably be able to practice a little bit at some point. They will have a chance to get away, kind of find their footing, find themselves without the holidays overlapping, right? Phoenix, being in Phoenix on New Year's Eve, winning that game. I'm guessing Memphis probably enjoyed themselves in the Phoenix metropolitan area after the contest. I don't have any inside sources on that, but I'm just guessing young millionaires went out and had a good time. Maybe not all of them, but some. It's a chance to just focus on basketball. The holidays are gone. Your road trip is not in a place. You're going to Minnesota, Houston, and then San Antonio for 2 games in a row. Houston's fun, but it's not like you're going and you're doing things and it's the holiday season. Distractions are minimized. You can focus on the game. You can focus on film study. You can focus on the Grizzlies and what they need to do. And that's important because something we're going to be talking about here on Locked On Grizzlies a lot over the next several weeks leading into the trade deadline. What kind of guys are out there? What kind of upgrades could there be? Is there enough time to see G.G. Jackson to see if you need to make such a move? Obviously, with the Dorian Finney-Smith rumors, more so than the Jimmy Butler ones, Memphis is looking. Memphis is inquiring. They're putting feelers out, at the very least, trying to see what they could do to upgrade this roster. But I just said that Luke Kennard was one of the better players in this Houston Rockets game. Kennard is likely one of the names that would be shipped out, not long for this Grizzlies' life beyond this season, more than likely. Zach Kleiman has some tough decisions to make, and a road trip like this in 4 games that are going to be competitive. Minnesota is going to be a competitive game. We've seen what the Houston Rockets can do. You're back in Houston next week. And then 2 games against Victor Wembanyama and the Spurs. You get more of a sample size as to who this Grizzlies team is and if a trade needs to be made. And hopefully you're closer to G.G. Jackson being back, and hopefully you're communicating better. There's opportunities. One of the most beautiful things about the NBA is, as difficult as a game might have been and as down you might feel after a loss, there's almost always a game coming up on the horizon. That's exactly what Memphis is doing heading into their game on Saturday against Minnesota. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated. We'll be back with you on Monday talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves game from Saturday night, and then also previewing another Houston Rockets game Monday night in Houston this time. I kind of wish there was a little bit more of a spacing out between the 2 games because of the physicality, because of the energy. Dylan Brooks wanted to fight, it seemed, every member of the Memphis Grizzlies at some point throughout the game. Would have been nice to have a little bit of a breather from that, but we're going to see Houston again. We'll preview Houston Grizzlies Part 3, and we'll talk about Minnesota, all that sort of stuff and more coming up on our next episode on Monday. Until then, make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you are getting your podcasts. Again, we're proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts, it is all good. Also, make sure you're subscribing to our free daily newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com. Again, LockedOnDaily.com. Grizzlies words from me, Grizzlies national NBA columns, NBA national columns, fantasy basketball work and advice, All sorts of great stuff. Again, Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you if you're subscribed already. If not, go to lockedondaily.com. Get Grizzlies content in your inbox every time a newsletter is sent out. It is free. Over at lockedondaily.com, click on the Grizzlies tab and subscribe. I'm Joe Mullinax. Thank you for being with me on this Friday. Keep your head up, Memphis. The Grizzlies are going to be okay. A tough loss, but this team's tough, and I do think they'll pick themselves up and get better heading on the road. Have a good one.